Hello, folks of Lowell. This is the Lowell Ledger podcast, and we're doing another, episode of Worth the Popcorn. This week we are talking about the movie Sleeping Dogs. Bill, did you want to give a loose idea of what this movie is about?
Yeah, sure. So, as everybody, it's been a while since we've been on. Obviously, last time we did Dune, which was pretty cool, and this one's a totally different movie, right? And so, in Sleeping Dogs, the story follows the main character, who is Roy Freeman, an ex-detective who looks to unravel a crime that he played a major role in solving. The problem is that Freeman, who's played by Academy Award winner Russell Crowe, has memory loss. He recently had an experimental surgery for Alzheimer's, and in the movie is going through some rehabilitation. And the movie opens kind of in Freeman's apartment. Reminder notes like, your name is Roy Freeman and you have Alzheimer's, and other notes are kind of on sticky pads and things like that, how to cook frozen dinners, and posted through his apartment, and he's trying to just remember little things like that. Kind of looks in the mirror at one point, and you see this big, thick, long gray beard with some bandages wrapped around his head, and then he kind of takes the bandages off, and you see these two really gruesome scars on his head from his recent surgery. And then really just to set the scene a little bit more, first couple scenes you get him at his doctor's appointment, and Freeman, he can't remember his parents' name or the year or city of his own birth, but there is some hope. The doctor tells him if all goes well, over time he'll start regaining his memory back in chunks. And as he begins to sort of piece his life together, he kind of discovers that not only was he a police detective for many years, that one case in particular kind of haunts him, and he played a role in that particular case. So that's the sort of the background before we get into the big part of the plot. But it also stars Karen Gillan, who plays an important role, and then also Tommy Flanagan, who plays Jimmy Remus, who is Roy Freeman's partner in the police force. It's an hour and 50 minutes long, and overall, kind of a interesting kind of whodunit type of movie. So, Justin, I guess I don't know if you want to give your initial thoughts or anything that you want to talk about originally here.
Yeah, and if I could kind of step aside really quickly, I realized that you did a great job introducing the movie, way better than IMDb did. But I don't think we introduced ourselves. So I'm Justin Tiemeyer. I write for The Ledger. And I handed it off to you while you're drinking.
Yeah, that's all right. My name's Bill Lee. I also write for the Ledger as well, and this is our third installment of Worth the Popcorn, and our third movie that we're reviewing on a podcast. So it's been fun so far, and I decided to choose this particular movie. I chose the first movie, and Justin chose the second, and now this is the third one, and then Justin will get his crack at the next podcast that we have. So, so it's been fun so far.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying it. Now, this movie was a little bit of a struggle for me. I started off really not liking it. It kind of surged a little bit in the middle for me, and then I was like, I wasn't sure how I felt about the ending. I did want to ask you, so do you think it's possible that you can just add a good actor to any movie and it makes it a good movie?
I think that's possible. Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard. I think Russell Crowe obviously is a really good actor, and he definitely carries the movie. But I would agree with you. There were some definite plot elements that were probably too much in this. But that's a great question. I think that can happen. It doesn't make it a great movie, but it makes it a palatable movie.
Yeah. And I think some actors, and a young Russell Crowe might be a good example of this. They don't need a particular writer or director. They are able to kind of self-direct in a way. And so you'll get this consistency between movies. Gladiator was kind of built to, emphasize his strengths. A Beautiful Mind was built to
Right.
emphasize his strengths. Was it the writer director, or was it Crow? I think it was more of a collaboration. But he had smaller roles in like 3:10 to Yuma, and I'm mainly bringing up right now movies that I thought were particularly good. Crow was great in 3:10 to Yuma. I felt like he really wasn't necessary in that movie. You
Yeah.
could have cast anybody, but you brought him on, and scenes that were going to be a 3 were a 5, little things like that. And then Man of Steel, I don't love that movie. It was the Zack Snyder Superman movie, and there was a lot wrong with that movie. But Russell Crowe at the beginning as this like science action hero was probably the best part of it. Every scene Russell Crowe was in was great. Kevin Costner made unnecessary sacrifices. What is going on there? Clearly a writing, directing decision. But when Russell Crowe was on the screen, he was really great.
Well, now that you bring that up, I was trying to think while you were talking of a movie that had a one-star actor.
Yeah.
And it was sort of an average movie because the rest of it wasn't that great. I was trying to think off the top of my head something. I couldn't come up with something. Is there anything that you can think of? Because you're right. I'm sure that's happened many times before, and I just can't seem to think of.
I feel like in the 90s, there were a few of those humdrum serial killer movies.
Yeah.
That if Morgan Freeman hadn't been in it, or if so-and-so hadn't been in it, it really wouldn't have caught me. I know it's happened. I just can't think of a lot right
me
now.
neither. And I think because this movie, you don't have any other sort of superstar actors in it. It's really Russell Crowe's movie.
Well, and that's the thing. Do you think people are seeing this for any other reason than, oh, there's another Russell Crowe movie?
That's kind of why I wanted to go see it.
Right, yeah.
Because I really enjoy Russell Crowe, and it seemed, I looked at just the trailer, and it seemed like an interesting concept. And the review that I actually wrote for the Ledger, I did bring up some other movies like that. I don't know if you were going to get to it or not, but, Christopher Nolan's Memento,
Yep.
and Martin Scorsese's Shutter Island, and Alan Parker's Angel Heart. You ever see Angel Heart?
No.
With Mickey
I
Rourke?
did see Shutter Island.
Did you see Memento?
I saw Memento. I was
Yeah.
going to bring that one up too.
Yeah. And so I think, they're coming up with a whole different not a different, it's sort of a recycled sort of plot theme, right?
Yeah.
And which is something, towards the end I always like to talk about. So it is a little bit recycled, just a different way of bringing it about with the, with the Alzheimer's and the experimental surgery and things like that. So we know that's sort of like this concept, like Memento, same thing. Like we know that he can't remember because of his accident what happened to him, and he's got to have all these notes plus tattoos and all these signs to help him remember things. If you get a chance, check out Angel Heart.
Okay.
It's with Mickey Rourke in 1987. Not Al Pacino. Robert De Niro plays an interesting role in it, but it's very similar. It's about a guy who loses his memory, and he's sort of a detective as well, and he tries to find out what happened, and all of a sudden he gets into it, and he knows he played a major role. And so it is sort of a recycled plot theme that has been used, and I would say not as good as those three movies. But I think I probably liked it a little more than you did, but at the same time, it had its issues.
Yeah, so I know you were looking at me and talking to me when you made that recommendation, but I felt like you were thinking about the Ledger audience, and I feel a little betrayed. Clearly, you were recommending that to our listeners at home, right?
I'm still going to recommend it. It's just, as I said, it doesn't hold weight against those other movies. But
so I really like that you made that point about how it kind of calls back to other movies, because that was a really strong thing for me. Not only there was an era before Harry Potter franchise and Marvel Cinematic Universe franchise and all of that. I guess before all that, you had James Bond as a franchise, but where you had the main actor as a franchise. I think I
Right.
brought up at a previous one, it was the Will Smith 4th of July movies.
Sure.
And Russell Crowe did really well in that era.
Yeah.
And he has latched on a little bit during this new era. I think he was in, was it The Mummy? It was one of the Universal Monsters movies when they were trying to make their own cinematic universe out of The Mummy and the Wolfman and all that kind of stuff. He plays Zeus in Thor: Blood and Thunder, I believe. He's been able to, make some money off of those like anybody else.
Like a lot of those guys and gals.
He's not playing Harry Potter. He's not playing Captain America. It's something that'll give him residuals, and it's not like he's probably hurting for money unless he wastes it all. But I also wanted to connect to the fact that it did feel like Memento. It felt like LA Confidential.
Yeah.
It felt like a lot of movies in the late 90s, early 2000s. You had some early Christopher Nolan, like you brought up, where you're questioning what reality is. And we get that through the Alzheimer's. But you also get the prevalence of this twist ending sort of thing, where it may or may not have been done well, right? Comedy, as with drama, they'll say that it should be unexpected but inevitable. So you need to lay down the foundation for the conclusion to be good.
Right.
And watching this movie for me, you said that's why I watched it, the Russell Crowe thing. I kind of felt like, and I'll give an example. So this cartoon called X-Men 97 came out this last month. Do you know anything about it?
No.
So it's a sequel to X-Men the Animated Series, which ran from, I think, 1992 to 1996. A lot of kids, when I was a kid, we were all watching it, and I really think this new show was meant to pull in 40-year-olds. And I think a lot of people were making fun of it before it came out because it was like 100% nostalgia. Why would this even exist except for these people that are posting memes about being 90s kids? And then you watch the opening sequence of the new show, and it has a different imagination of the theme song that goes like everybody gets really excited for this. And it's all nostalgia there. And then they start telling this unique, original story that pulls from the comics but really feels like it's speaking to today. And it's like, whoa, that wasn't nostalgia. This Russell Crowe film, though, felt like it was meant to be a different kind of nostalgia, right? Do you remember when LA Confidential came out and what you felt? And do you remember A Beautiful Mind and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Did you get that vibe, or was
definitely.
it moving that forward?
I think it, as you said, it didn't do it as well as those types of movies where there was that, LA Confidential, for example, that setting played a huge role in that. I didn't get that sense here, which I was hoping, with some of those whodunit type of stories like Chinatown, going way back, right? You get this really interesting setting that helps add to this. To the plot of the movie. I didn't get that sense. I think that was maybe detracting from this movie a little bit, the setting itself. I didn't have a good idea of what it was because it was all over the place. And I think that because there was so many, now I'm bringing up, the answer is yes to your question. I felt as though it did feel a little bit older, as you said, sort of like a 90s feel. Maybe it wanted to feel that. But it didn't attain that, I guess.
Right. It didn't get 100% of it. It felt like, somebody doing a tribute to a Russell Crowe film.
Yeah, and then I think what happened in this movie is that, one of the faults that I found with it is that there were just I felt too many characters involved. It was hard to keep track of who was doing what, and the love triangle here and maybe a love triangle there. And I felt as though they were really trying their best to put all the pieces together. And as you said, like the ending in these types of movies and the ones that I mentioned before, the ending is got to be kind of like a pow ending, right? It's got to shock you. And I didn't get the same sense from Sleeping Dogs, that ending was like a shocker to me. And so I was a little, and that's why I don't think it's as good as the other ones. I liked it still because it was still a surprise ending, but it wasn't the same as maybe Memento, Shutter Island, and definitely Angel Heart. When you get a chance to see that one's is unique in itself. So in that respect, I was the ending that played out was a little disappointing because I maybe saw some things coming.
Beginning, I'm seeing this for Russell Crowe. Ending, who was your favorite actor? Who did you end up seeing it for? Was it still Russell? Russ, our guy? Rusty?
That's a good question. I like the secondary characters. The I'm trying to remember the actress's name. Karen Gillan, I thought was pretty good in it. Again, she plays this sort of a duplicitous role, right? She's one person, but then changes her identity down the road to become somebody else, which adds some tension, but also some confusion to the movie. But I liked her, and I liked Tommy Flanagan, who played his partner. I thought he did a really good job. But there wasn't necessarily, chemistry, right? You got to have some chemistry between actors, and I didn't necessarily get the feeling that there was a lot of that with these three. But I would still say that it's Russell Crowe's movie. But what do you think?
So I ended up feeling like, if you were going to watch this movie, you should watch it for Karen Gillan. Because for me, the beginning, right, you establish that he has Alzheimer's. You establish that there's a guy who's going to, I think he has the death penalty, right?
Yes.
He's gotten all of his chances at a pardon. The only thing that can get him out is if somebody goes back and solves the case the right way.
Correct.
Right? You got that. It just feels... It doesn't suck me in. It's pretty boring to me. But there's this part, and you've done the substitute teaching thing a bunch, right?
I have.
Have you ever covered Hamlet when you were subbing?
I've taught Hamlet, so I know.
Yeah. Oh, so you
I
know all
Hamlet.
about it.
Yeah.
So the story that happens in the middle of the story reminds me of the mousetrap in Hamlet, which for our listeners at home, there's a play within a play,
right?
And it's meant to catch the murderous new king, because you have to
they're
prove
looking
that he did
for his
it.
reaction, right, to the play, and if the reaction is of shock, then he's guilty.
And so we don't get as much of the reaction, but we get a strong story within a story, and it's based on somebody's novella, I think it is.
Yeah.
That's basically all just facts from his perspective. And you can tell there that everybody is purposely acting poorly because it's what he remembers, it's how he writes them, right? So let's imagine it's a true story about your favorite actor. Who is your favorite actor?
I mean, I have a man crush for Brad Pitt. I just think everything he does is really good.
So we're trying to adapt his life story, but it's written by somebody who is really just not a good writer. They have ideas, but they're bad ideas.
Sure.
Like it's that friend of yours who's like, I've got a sequel to the Goosebumps movie, and I pitched it to some people in Hollywood, and it's the most it's terrible, right? So even cool Brad Pitt's life story, written by, me when I was 16, is gonna be the worst thing ever,
right.
And it's probably not going to, even with revisions and a good director, turn into a good movie. There's no director and actors that are gonna make this great. So this story within a story, takes what I thought of as bad acting when they're supposed to be good acting in the beginning, and it says you've got an excuse. Just overact, underact, whatever you do. You can be a bad actor because we can say, it's based on this terrible novella. Who would you be? You're the ridiculous caricature of a woman that's obsessed with the main character, who's clearly the writer, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's where Karen Gillan is introduced, and she's so like over the top and ridiculous in this, and it becomes charming and like pulls me into the movie more. And then it ends, and you kind of go back to the status quo with a lot of the other actors, but Karen Gillan is still, she's more serious. Yeah. She's still acting great. She's quirky still. There's still some fun little isms. She seems a little silly even in the serious scenes, but it feels like she gets it, like what's going on with this script. And part of me wondered, you brought up the fact that there was no pow moment. Part of me wondered if they got lost making this movie, right? That as so many times happens, I don't know if you've ever gotten caught up in the Star Wars like fandom discussions, but
no, definitely not. I love Star Wars, but not the discussions.
Right. So you've got movies where J.J. Abrams was the showrunner. I forget the name of the director that everybody hated for Episode 8. And then you've got Bob Iger, who's, one of the execs that seems to want to dip his toe in some of these discussions about where a movie goes, because you can't make fun of China because they're a big market, and
right.
We've got to sell the toys and all that kind of stuff. And I'm using Bob Iger to represent any executive who stepped on a creative person's image. And with Sleeping Dogs, it felt like either something like that was going on, or like the writer just didn't know where he wanted to go with the story. It's based on a book, which I'm guessing neither of us read.
No.
But so you brought up that there's kind of this moment where it wraps everything together and makes sense.
Right.
Did you feel like the movie was heading towards making sense in the end, the whole movie?
I felt like it wanted to, and I as a audience member wanted it to, because that's the point of the movie, right? Is that we want. So what I was intrigued about with this movie is that, okay, the concept, again, we've seen a couple concept movies already, and the concept here is that, okay, this guy's got to unwrap this mystery, and he knows he's a part of it, but he's got to try to figure out who did this murder, and he's gaining. What I liked about it is that he is gaining his memory back at the same time, where these other characters know that he has this Alzheimer's, and they're kind of pulling him in different directions, or at least he thinks that they're pulling them in because he doesn't know what to think, because it doesn't have his memory. So that's part of the intrigue of it, is that he's starting to gain his memory back, and he is kind of becoming a different person, not like the person he was before as this police detective.
Right, because your personality is your memories, essentially.
Correct, right, exactly. And so that's what kind of intrigued me about it, with the fact that, okay, how is this all going to play out? Because he is getting his memory back. He's starting to figure out who did, this murder, and this innocent guy is on death row, and they were trying. I think there were so many moving parts that's why it made the ending. It was still, I thought, a decent ending, but it could have really been much better, because there was just so much going on in it. I was satisfied enough with the whole thing. I wasn't disappointed. I would recommend the movie, but with the caveat, it's just a whodunit movie. It's not it's not going to win an Academy Award or anything like that. So I actually kind of liked following Russell Crowe and how he was, starting to figure out who done it, and how he was. And that's the key of all these movies that I've already mentioned, that we've talked about, is that how was his role a big part of it,
right? And
he starts to figure that out as well. Now, did they pull it off? Probably not, but it satisfied me enough, I guess, where I was like, okay, that was coming out of the movie. I was like, it wasn't great, but it was good enough for me.
It was worth the popcorn.
It was worth the popcorn, just enough.
Trademark pending. So the reason I bring that up is I felt like there was an ending that happened 10 minutes before the actual ending. And for me, that ending was a little bit more satisfying. Because I'm not going to say what the ending, the pre-ending ending was, but it convinced you that things were wrapped up, but you as the viewer may not have fully understood how they were wrapped up.
Okay.
And the reason I like that is because Alzheimer's says unreliable narrator.
Yes.
Terrible novella that clearly contradicts facts from other people, says unreliable narrator. Even this idea of a story within a story.
Good novella too, though, with an unreliable narrator, not just a bad novella, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. And then this story within a story, that just gives you this perfect instance to not necessarily tell the truth, right? It's fiction. But even if it's nonfiction, it's this one guy's ideas based on his desires, his wants, his anger, all that kind of stuff. And so I really thought it was heading towards this. You're going to see pools of blood. People are going to turn on each other. But really, we don't ultimately know what happened. And yet, a decision has to be made in this court case. And maybe the jury says this is what happened based on Russell Crowe's character's investigation. I liked that movie more, and that might just be me asserting my ego. I like leaving more there. Like, if there is a solution to this, you're going to want to rewatch it to pick up on it. Oh, wow. Now I can't unsee it. Like how some people guessed the end of the series of Game of Thrones by looking for clues within the books that were really deep.
Yeah.
I like that a little bit better than I just got so tired of the 90s movies where somebody ends up on the boat, but then this other person kills them at the last minute. It's like, oh my gosh, I never would have expected that. And that's because they didn't set up for it. This was really, I think you had something to say on that as well. Did you?
No.
So leads me to another thing. What genre is this movie?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you call these, like whodunits. I don't know. That's the way I would classify
Technically
it.
a mystery.
Yeah, mystery.
Right?
Yeah.
You could put it in the drama camp. At the beginning, it seemed like it was going to be, and when I read the synopsis, I thought it was going to be more of a drama like A Beautiful Mind. Drama elements. But I also had a feeling like there was a secret science fiction plot in it.
Huh.
Because they have basically a magical pill that removes someone's Alzheimer's. And it's even set up the way a sci-fi movie will, where there's like a flashback to this lady administering the pill. And personally, I felt like the Alzheimer's thing was a really cheap gimmick in the end, because they obeyed the rules of him having memory problems sporadically, which, So
you didn't like the experimental surgery, which would allow his memory to kind of come back.
I thought it was really convenient, right?
Yeah, of course.
It was nothing more than a plot device. At the beginning, I thought it was going to be somebody really knew someone with Alzheimer's or some other, source of dementia, and really wanted you to see that's really difficult, and here are the heartbreaks, and here are the great moments, and all that kind of stuff. And they went really hard at the beginning. Oh man, he's basically alone with Alzheimer's. That's hard. Let's see some of the really difficult parts of that. I thought it was going to be a straight up drama for a lot more of it. And I think I was just a little almost betrayed by how they dealt with Alzheimer's, just because to use someone else's, do you know anybody who has suffered from any form of dementia?
Sure.
I mean, it affects a community. That's not just a person who's struggling, but everybody around them. It's almost like a form of torture, depending on how advanced it is and all that kind of stuff. And
I guess I just saw it as a plot device, though. I know what you're saying. I wasn't. You're almost saying like you were offended by it.
Yeah, I would almost rather they just do campy amnesia sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
well, then they'd be copying Memento. That's the thing.
But and some of my favorite artists have been accused of this sort of thing, using other people's mental illness and struggles as a plot device. Probably nobody cares, but in the comic books, Brian Michael Bendis wrote Moon Knight, who has multiple personalities, and everybody was on his case about how they really trivialized, some mental illness that readers of Brian Michael Bendis actually had. And it kind of opened my eyes to just that thing of, what if my mom had dementia and I went and saw this movie and see this magical pill that takes it away. Oh wow, wouldn't that be great? Then I wouldn't have to go in there and she calls me Henry instead of Justin.
Right.
I feel like it has the opportunity to really cause a bad experience for somebody, especially if you're going in expecting, okay, this is going to be a story that really understands the trouble that I'm going through. Because basically, if you look at what it is, it says Russell Crowe, and then it says Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
So
I see your point.
You know what I mean?
Like, sure. I see your point.
I don't want to,
especially if you know somebody presently somewhat close to has Alzheimer's. You go into this and it's a little. Maybe I could see where somebody could not necessarily be offended, but be put off a little bit by the plot.
And this
device.
is an era where you have to think about escapism and engagement in your stories. Can you ever do full escapism? I would say, my name's Justin. I don't know if every Justin thinks about this, but I personally think about, how can I do justice in this world? How can I do good? And so I can never just get into like full escapism things like, a lot of reality TV these days. Mm-hmm. I need something that's going to say, Battlestar Galactica, the remake series in the 2000s. It's a space thing, but it was dealing with some stuff that was really prevalent then. It addresses that whole George W. Bush era feeling of terrorism and the bad guys are among us sort of feeling.
Sure, but it's still escapism.
Right, escapism that also engages. You can look at it from a pure escapism perspective, or you can engage.
Well, this is, again, I don't know if that's the goal of this movie. The goal of the movie is it's this, they're trying to, it's a mystery and they're trying to solve the mystery, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It is in a way escapism because it's not pushing an agenda necessarily. I don't think it is, at least. It's just an entertaining movie. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I see it as escapism because there's no particular theme when it comes to this movie.
They're not
whatsoever.
really trying to make you advocate for something, right? This isn't against America's involvement in Syria.
Correct.
A couple decades ago. It's not based on any of that stuff. It's just saying, here's a Russell Crowe movie for you.
Yeah, an entertaining movie, no particular theme. And maybe that's part of the weakness of it. It could have had more to it, and maybe some of those movies that I mentioned before had maybe more of a theme to it.
Right. Yeah, I think it needed to decide what it wanted to be a little bit more firmly for me to make it work.
Yeah, that makes
sense. Was it a drama about Alzheimer's? No. Was it a mystery? Yes, but it used really old tropes to, just feel almost like a canned mystery at some point.
Yeah.
Did you leave enough breadcrumbs for us to get to the conclusion ourselves?
Right.
Was it science fiction? Like he suddenly has amazing memory and there were just a lot of ways I think they could have gone with it. And that's one of those reasons I thought, were there executives involved? Did the writer and director not agree? Because it it didn't seem like they pointed all their arrows in the same direction. I
Yeah.
can handle
Yep.
the extra actors, right? The extra characters, if they're all playing, dancing the same dance number.
Yeah, so then we got to basically pin this on the writer and director Adam Cooper. I mean, there are other writers,
didn't
but
agree
he
with
was
himself? Yeah.
he was the director and probably the main writer, but there were two other writers. So we got
And there's adaptation of a book involved. There's the other writers. There's the studio, right? How much of this was, what were there reshoots? Was there, some things were cut in the editing room. But yeah, I mean, going back to it, if we want to, do you feel good moving on to kind of our final?
Yeah, let's do it. I felt as though this movie was a tough one to review anyways, in a way, or do a podcast to, because it's not as as deep as the two movies we saw previous. But again, I liked it. Yeah, I guess the whole idea of finding out who you really are, kind of until it's too late, seems to work for me in this, and that's basically what happens with Russell Crowe. He kind of finds out who he really is in the end, and basically each of the characters of all those types of movies wish they want to find the answers to their dilemmas, and once they do, they're not really sure that they like what they see, right? And I feel like this does that, again, not as well as some other ones. So overall, I use these like 5 things I always talk about. Did it make me think? Sure, it made me think, trying to figure things out, not in a deep way as the other 2 movies we've reviewed, but it made me think about, okay, what's going on here as an entertaining thing. Was it unique, different? Not really. It was a bit recycled, right? And they used, Alzheimer's as sort of this plot device to help push it. Maybe not the best decision, but so it was a little recycled. Visually, it was okay. I didn't, wasn't really thrown by it, but it's not meant to be that visual. Although the setting could have played a much bigger role in this, and it didn't. So I felt as though they missed something, an opportunity there to really give us a strong setting. I thought the story was interesting. Was the acting fantastic? It was good enough for me, And so when I do recommend it, I think it's just it's an entertaining movie. It's a good whodunit. It's not one of the best, but I felt as though Russell Crowe did enough. And as you mentioned, Karen Gillan was also quite good in this, along with some of the other secondary actors. But maybe there was a little too much going on for this movie to really pull things off.
I want to add too, when we're talking about actors, just before I get to my kind of final word on it, Martin Sokas, he plays Dr. Joseph Weider in it. His character wasn't featured a whole lot, but he was a pretty fantastic actor in it.
Yeah.
And there were some scenes where I actually thought he looked like a young Russell Crowe.
Ah, interesting.
Like maybe they had hired him to play Russell Crowe in the flashbacks, and then they were like, nah, he needs more feature time.
Yeah. No, he was good. I agree with you.
I have theories like that quite often. The Star Trek Picard show, most of the young actors look like the old characters, and I was like, were they just trying to reboot this? And then they got some of the big actors to sign on. They decided to do. But yeah, I almost wish Martin Sokas had played young Russell Crowe and then just kind of put on a suit and a head bandage to play him in the future. My final word is, it reminded me of the old movie Batman and Robin, where
which one? Who starring?
So
George
Clooney.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's got Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze saying things like "Nice to meet you," and "The Iceman cometh." And my brother and I invented another phrase that was not actually in the movie, but we're trying to make it canon, which is "cool beans." But I don't know who on the set of that movie thought it was a sequel to the 1989 Batman movie, and who on the set of that movie thought it was a sequel to the 1966 series,
right,
with the Batusi,
right,
and the running around with a bomb, and the shark bat spray sort of thing.
Right.
Because I feel like it was really written to be campy, and the only person who understood what it was supposed to be was Uma Thurman. Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of got there with the quotes, but really he was just there to be Arnold Schwarzenegger from Running Man and all the other ones where he says these terrible puns all the time. And I really felt like that's what this movie was. I don't know that everybody got the direction that they needed to say, oh, we're actually going this way with this movie. But I felt like Karen Gillan had the chops to kind of say, I understand the script and I'm going to act it correctly in every scene. And it requires different things of me when I'm in the novella, and it requires different things for me afterwards. And she got very close to saving it for me. I think I'm going to give it 2 kernels of popcorn.
So it's kind of a thumbs up and thumbs down in a way, right? I mean,
right,
which is good. We don't have to agree.
It started
all the time.
low, went up, and then it
and
I think she
my
almost
thumb's
saved
more
it.
of a 3/4 up, like not entirely up. So it seems like yours is not entirely down, but kind of.
Karen Gillan made a good case, and I feel like with a couple of tweaks of the story after the novella, or a story within a story, right? And then changing what the ending is, I would have probably given it about a 3.5 myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just seemed like, these kinds of movies always get released in the first quarter of the year. This was a March movie, but because of spring breaks and holidays and all that kind of stuff, we're recording it now. The studio knew they had something that wasn't going to be terribly popular. They buried it in the first quarter of the year, but it almost got there. And I didn't want, when you picked the movie, I didn't want that to be the first one that I didn't like. So I was like, no, I'm going to make a case for why this is good.
No, you got to go. You got to go with what you're feeling. Absolutely.
But also, when people make art, I never want to be the person that says stop making art.
Yeah.
Like the writer, the director, some of these actors that I didn't like their work. I mean, Russell Crowe, by all measures, is a pretty terrible person off the screen. Like, he gets into fights with people who work in the service industry, and he strangled a black woman once.
Oh, wow.
And they keep hiring him. Even him, if he keeps making art, then he's probably not assaulting anybody. So, but with our reviews, I want it to be the sort of thing that we can always find something good in it. Because the last thing I want in my entire life, if you're listening to this and you're like, I love Russell Crowe as an actor, I want to be just like him, but Justin talked about how bad he was in this movie and now I want to stop acting, ignore everything I've said and turn this off and go watch a Russell Crowe movie, because nobody should ever be discouraged from making art. It's one of the most important things out there. But yeah, sometimes it's going to be better than worse. And I do think a lot of the time when it goes wrong, it's not the artist, right? Is it going to be the writer-director or the cooperation between the writer-director and the studio?
Well, let's face it, it's you hear people talk about all the times. Sometimes they just get lucky. Things happen to work.
Mm-hmm.
All these things come together, and it works out to become a great movie. But
the 2008 Iron Man is a good example of that.
Yeah.
They wrote next to no. Well, I'll take that back. They wrote dialogue, but a lot of people improvised, and it just magically happened. And they couldn't capture it again in Iron Man 2.
Exactly. So,
and it sure didn't happen in Thor: Dark World.
It's people when movies hit, a lot of people say I really didn't think this was going to hit, but for whatever reason, it connected with an audience. And to your point about good art, bad art, people are trying to do well with it, and they hope it hits. But there's so many moving parts in a movie; it must be really difficult.
It's a business and it's an art.
Correct.
And I'm likely to blame the business part more than anything else. Do I think Russell Crowe's done as an actor? Probably not.
Yeah,
he's going to be fun in something, and like I said, keep him off the streets. Keep him in movie theaters instead of going after bellhops. But I think that's the important thing, is just if we could get some more of that content I really liked what happened during the pandemic because you couldn't get as many writers and directors inside of people's houses safely. So people were making these independent movies,
Right.
and they were just making the art they want to make.
Yep.
And some weird horror movies came out of it, and some cool dramas, and not a lot did, but it was a different way of looking at things, and it was a little bit more divorced from that whole will it sell thing. It was just literally, I'm going to go crazy if I don't make this short film. And
Sure, they had to do it.
yeah. So, all right.
All
Well,
right.
we got out of the way the first movie that I didn't like. I'll pick the next movie
Yep.
and make sure that you don't like it so that we just get all the awkwardness out of the way.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
No.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight for our Worth the Popcorn segment with Justin Tiemeyer and Bill Lee. We'll see you next time, and thanks for listening.